On today's episode, learn how to make an all-natural, easy ebonizing stain. This episode was brought to you by Woodcraft, helping you make wood work. So recently, I made this coffee table, and I knew right from the beginning when I was designing it, I wanted it black. I mean like jet black as night itself. Now to get black that dark, there's a couple of options you can go. You can use paint, and paint will definitely get it to that intensity darkness I want, but paint comes with a few setbacks. Paint is a surface-mounted product, which means if that should get bumped or nicked, it's probably going to chip off, revealing the wood underneath. I wanted something that will penetrate deep into the wood. The other thing about paint is, well, paint is kind of thick, so when I put it on, it's going to have the tendency to want to fill in the grain on top, and I want that to actually show and come through. So what's my options? Well, I could use a stain. Now the problem with stains is, depending on the brand, the wood you're using, it doesn't always get black. I mean, it gets like maybe blackish, but not that dark intensity black that I want. Here, let me show you an example of it. So here's an example. This is a stain from one of the big box stores, and it's readily available pretty much anywhere. And on the can, it gives the impression that it's pretty dark. But here it is on some white oak, the same material that I built my coffee table out of, and you can see it looks nowhere like this black. So how did I get my coffee table so black? Well, I remembered an article that Boggs wrote some years ago. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Boggs, I'm a huge fan of him. Brian is a master chair maker. He started off in his backyard with just some hand tools, and he made chairs that carried him through to his own business, where he now has a shop and employees, and he designs his own original pieces of work. What I really like about Brian is he's got a true passion for this craft. He also has a really good eye for an artistic design. And lastly, although I never met him, he seems like a really humble guy in everything that I've seen or read about him. So in this article, Brian brings out that he, for years, tried to come up with something that really gave that dark black look to the wood. And so here's his recipe. If you're curious about reading the actual article, I'll make sure to put a link in the description below. Okay, before we get going, it's probably not a bad idea to wear some gloves and a smock or an apron to protect your clothes. And I have this drop cloth put on my workbench. And a super great and easy drop cloth is an old shower curtain. It won't let any of the stain penetrate through, and it can wipe off real easy for cleanup. Okay, now let me show you the ingredients. The main ingredient for this, you pick up at your local grocery store. It's just some distilled white vinegar. The second ingredient, you probably have it laying around here in the shop, and that's some steel wool. Now what you'll do is you're going to take the steel wool and you're going to put it inside the vinegar, and you're going to wait 10 days, minimum 10 days. You want to wait until that steel wool completely dissolves, and then you're left with a dark colored substance. Now the color will range anywhere from gray to brown, and in this case, this time it came out looking a little bit red. Oh, also to kind of help speed that process up a little bit, I like to take some regular old nails and throw that in there too for that 10-day brewing process. After the 10 days, you're going to have some floaties in there. So you're going to want to pour it through some kind of strainer or filter to get that out. Okay, now that you have this formula, you can put it on the wood. So I'm not a chemist, but there's something about this formula, this creation here, and when it reacts with the wood, the natural tannin acids in the wood. Now, each tree has a different amount of tannin acid, and the more that's in the wood, well, it's going to give you a darker reaction to it. Now, I've done this process before. Many, many years ago I did it, but I was unhappy with it because what I would get would be something that was dark, but it still had like a grayish or a blue haze to it. It just wasn't clear. That's where Brian Boggs comes in with the extra ingredient to make this perfect. And that is, it's a tree bark. Now, I'm probably going to butcher the name of this. I think it's pronounced queblancho. It's a Spanish tree bark. And you can get it, not at your local grocery store. You can get it online. Woodcraft might even have it. But it's a powder. And you're going to take a teaspoon of this to 1 pint of warm water and mix it up. Now, this probably isn't the best stuff to breathe, so make sure you're kind of at a distance or maybe even wearing a mask with it. Okay, now let me show you what Brian's recipe can do to the wood. All right, once again, this is a piece of white oak, the same that I used on my coffee table. And I'm first going to put on the tree bark tea solution, if you will. And there's not much change right off the bat with this. And I don't have to let it completely dry. Keeping it damp is fine. I just want to make sure I don't have any large puddles of it on there. So I'll just dab a couple of areas. Okay, now comes the magic. Now I'm going to put on the white vinegar solution. And this will happen almost immediately. Now it doesn't look that dark right now. But I'm going to start my timer and see what we got for it to come up to its dark black. Okay, so you can see that I'm just past 6.5 minutes so far, and you can see how dark it is. In fact, let's compare it to that store-bought stain versus this. Now, it's not quite as dark as what my coffee table turned out to be. So I'm going to do the last step that Brian says, and he mentions to go back over with the tree bark tea, put that on there. That will help. Oh yeah, you can, geez, look at that. You can see it. As soon as that goes on, it starts to get darker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sit overnight, just like I did my coffee table, and we'll come back here and check it out in the morning. And this also had me wondering, well, how does it react on other species of wood? Like which woods would have more of that tannic acid in it? So while this is sitting, I'm going to round up some other scrap pieces of wood laying around the shop. I'm going to do the same treatment, and we'll check them all out tomorrow morning. So wow, look how great this is. I mean, it's like 10 times darker than what that stain could possibly do. Now, I knew it was going to work well on oak because obviously I did it on my coffee table, but I wanted to check it out on some other types of woods. Now, in the article that Brian Boggs wrote, he showed an example of using a walnut. So that looks fantastic. And he also showed an example of cherry. So I knew both of these it was going to work well on. But I wasn't sure about some other woods. So let's take a look. Here's maple. It did a great job on maple. It also worked really well on, this is birch. I was surprised too that it did well on poplar. And the one that was most surprising to me, I didn't think would work at all, and that was on pine. This is southern yellow pine. Now, out of all of them, I'd probably say the weakest is the pine. But let's face it, pine is a problematic wood to try and stain anyway. So overall, this formula works great. Now, if you're interested in using Brian Boggs' recipe, I highly encourage you to read his article there below in the description, because he points out some problems and solutions for it that you might run into. So on my coffee table, after the ebonizing process was done, I sealed it all in with a top coat from Crystal-Lac. It's a product that I've been using for the last few years and I really like it. However, I'm always interested in learning what others prefer. I mean, honestly, like staining and finishing, that's the weakest area for me in woodworking. So if you have a favorite wood with a particular stain and top coat that you absolutely love, feel free to put it down there in the comments. I would love to read about it, and I'm sure others would like to learn from it as well. And speaking of learning, I offer a free monthly newsletter. Each newsletter has anywhere from 6 to 8 articles/videos in it from not only myself, but contributors such as Gerald Vance, Mitch Peacock, and my friend and mentor, Dennis Laney. In the newsletter, I also like to give suggested reading because I think having knowledge, especially from books, is an absolute must in improving your woodworking. I'm even thinking about putting a suggested tool list in there as well. These are tools that I find myself reaching for day after day here in my shop. Now, last month in the newsletter, Crystal-Lac made an exclusive offer only for the subscribers to get 20% off some of their product. And let me tell you, you subscribers, you absolutely took advantage of it. I was really surprised. So, it's another reason for you to sign up for this free newsletter because you just might get some special offers that you can't get anywhere else. Okay, just to give you a heads up on some upcoming videos. Well, previously I had told you I was going to film the making of this dining room table. And I asked how you guys wanted to see it. And I asked 3 different ways. It would be either fast, break it down into segments, or a long video. And I said it's probably going to be over an hour for the long video. Well, after I took the footage and put it in the editor, I have over 5.5 hours of footage there. So I'm definitely going to break it down into segments. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming up as well. I'm also working on some chairs, and I decided to film that because building chairs is incredibly complicated. If you've never done one, it definitely raises your level of woodworking. And of course, as always, if you have a question about a project you're working on in your shop, well, feel free to email me at woodshopintime@gmail.com, because my whole goal of this video, the newsletter, and more is to make you a better woodworker. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and keep on dancing.